Australia finally admitted it, quietly, reluctantly, without fanfare. When the housing crisis, healthcare shortage, and trades collapse hit, they didn't talk about skills gaps anymore. They talked about one solution that kept showing up. Hint, it wasn't robots, it was us, Filipinos. Australia looked in the mirror and realized the backbone of its recovery wasn't built in Melbourne or Sydney. It was built by Filipino hands, hearts, and minds. If you're interested in this topic, hit the like button, subscribe, and type interested in the comments and I will give you a heart. You've seen the headlines. Australia is on the edge of a skills cliff. They keep talking about skills shortages, labor gaps, population pressures. But what they're not shouting, what the global setup is quietly admitting, is that the very people stepping in to stop the slide are Filipinos. Yes, Filipinos. And this isn't a story about mere labor. This is about systemic shift. Australia just confessed that it needs us, and the world couldn't ignore it. Take a breath and picture this. While Aussie skies were being filled with talk of the next boom, the job market was quietly dying of thirst. In 2025, nearly 1 in 3 occupations in Australia were classified as skills shortage jobs. Working in Australia, employer services, construction, healthcare, trades, tech, everywhere you look, the gap is wide. The country used to rely on homegrown talent. Now it's rigging a net to catch global talent, and Filipinos have jumped right in. Now here's where Australia stops talking and starts outsourcing. The Australian Department of Home Affairs 2024-25 Skilled Migration Report shows Filipino citizenship ranked among the top 3 nationalities granted skilled migration pathways. 7,880 Filipino primary visa holders in that period alone. Think about that for a second. Australia is giving Filipinos visas as fast as plumbers give out quotes at Sydney tradie fairs. Because Australia needs something deeper than bodies, it needs reliability. But it isn't just about numbers or visas, it's about trust. Australia is finally admitting that when it comes to the jobs nobody wants anymore, nursing long-term care patients, building homes in remote towns, troubleshooting digital breakdowns, it's Filipinos who show up day after day and don't hang the phone. In a country that thrives on systems, protocols, credentials, we disrupted it. And they noticed. Here's a metaphor for you. Imagine Australia's labor system as a luxury sedan. It looks sleek, powerful, ready to ride, but the driver's missing. The engineers are genius, the bodywork gleams, but no one's behind the wheel steering the thing. Filipinos climbed into the driver's seat. Suddenly, the engine roars again. The dashboard lights up, Australia's getting moving. That's the crack that turned into a canyon. Let's zoom into one sector, aged care. Australia's older population is growing, the system is creaking, and the demand for caregivers exploded. Meanwhile, Filipino caregivers well-versed in malasakit, bayanyanan, and working far from home are filling that void. Official Australian job market trackers show that healthcare and social assistance visas saw an 48.7% increase year on year to 31 March 2025. The world doesn't always see the Filipino hand, but when the system depends on it, that's when the confession happens. Speaking of confessions, in a leaked briefing last year, an Australian minister told the press, without overseas skilled labor, especially from the Philippines and India, we cannot maintain health, build our infrastructure, nor meet our climate targets. They didn't say it for drama, they said it because the paperwork screamed it. The tables were laid, the chairs empty, and someone had to sit and fix things. The Filipinos did. Yet there's a part of this story that's unspoken. The part behind the numbers. The families setting up in Perth. The nurses in Melbourne who haven't been home in months. The tech graduates from Manila who moved to Brisbane because the job matched their skill, not because they had to leave. Their story is one of ambition, of persistence, of not accepting the temporary label anymore. Australia is also shifting its visa strategy. The Skills in Demand (SID) visa, launched December 2024, replaced old temporary systems and prioritized core skills, specialist skills, and labor agreement streams. That's policy admitting we need you permanently, not just for 6 months, but for decades. The world's telling Australia this too, whether Canberra likes it or not. Through technology. And this is key. While Australia wrestles with its own demographic hangover, the Philippines watches. Because the Filipino worker in so many places doesn't just fill gaps, they stand at the center of what was supposed to be impossible. Australia can't explain how we arrived at this level of dependability, but they're beginning to accept that the why doesn't matter as much as the who. So here we are, Filipinos not just in the room, not just doing the job, they're holding it together. Australia admitted the truth and the world is slowly listening. Comment proud Pinoy if you believe that this isn't just another job story, it's a story of global strategy and we're at the forefront. If part one was about Australia's confession, this part is about the aftermath. The realization that the confession wasn't a one-time headline, but a hard truth shaping their entire future. Because once a country admits dependence, the next question becomes, how deep does it go? Let's talk numbers, not niceties. In 2025, the Australian Bureau of Statistics projected that by 2030, the nation's working age population will shrink by nearly 430,000 if immigration slows down. Who fills that void? Filipinos, the only group whose language fluency, work ethic, and education align seamlessly with Australia's economic machinery. When the Australian Financial Review called the Philippines a strategic talent source, not just a labor market, that wasn't flattery. That was an admission of survival. But here's the irony. Australia once saw Filipinos as short-term help. Now they're the long-term solution. The country's own Productivity Commission report in early 2025 stated that sustaining economic output without continued migration from key countries like the Philippines is no longer viable. Translation? Without us, the machine stops running. Let's zoom into real life for a second. Meet Jenny, a Filipina nurse in Sydney. She works in aged care, handling double shifts because the facility can't hire fast enough. When you ask her how many Filipinos are on her floor, she laughs. Almost everyone. Then her face drops. When one of us calls in sick, the whole unit feels it. We hold this place together. That's not an exaggeration. It's a confession with a smile on top of exhaustion. Australia's economy is built on layers: mining, education, healthcare, construction. In every layer, Filipinos are wedged like steel beams, keeping it upright. They're the ones on construction sites in Queensland, fixing IT systems in Canberra, and teaching math in regional schools that Australians themselves won't move to. You want to see the quiet Filipino revolution? Drive through rural Australia. There's a Filipino nurse in every clinic, a Filipino engineer on every infrastructure project, a Filipino teacher in every town that's still breathing. But here's the plot twist Australia didn't plan for. Dependence creates leverage. The more they rely on Filipinos, the louder the Filipino voice becomes. Unions have started calling for better protections for migrant workers because if Filipinos walk off the job, half the system collapses. Even politicians are softening their tone. One lawmaker recently said during a parliamentary debate, the Filipino community is no longer an imported workforce, it's a pillar of our nation's future. You don't say that unless you've been humbled by reality. But there's a deeper truth Australia is still grappling with. Filipinos don't just fill gaps, they fix cultures. Where rigid bureaucracies exist, Filipinos add empathy. Where isolation thrives, Filipinos build community. The term Filipino effect has even started floating in business journals to describe the morale boost that comes when Filipinos join a team. Because when the meeting gets tense, there's always that one Pinoy who cracks a smile, offers coffee, and reminds everyone why they're there. You can't automate that. Let's not romanticize it too much though. Behind that resilience is pain. Many of these workers send money home to families they haven't hugged in years. Their kids grow up through screens. They miss birthdays, graduations, and sometimes goodbyes. They're not heroes by choice, they're heroes by necessity. And yet, in their sacrifice, Australia found its stability. That's the part of the confession you don't read in press releases. Australia's business community knows it too. According to a 2025 report by the Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, small business owners ranked Filipino employees 1 for loyalty and 2 for leadership potential, just behind locals born in Australia. That's not coincidence, that's reputation turning into respect, and respect turns into policy. The truth is, Australia can't replace Filipinos without rewriting its entire economic story. They've built a model that runs on Filipino grit and kindness, a currency no AI or automation can replicate. Because while technology makes systems smarter, it's Filipinos who make them work. And that is what Australia is just beginning to understand. So when you see another headline about migrant workers filling the gap, remember what's between the lines. It's not filling the gap, it's holding the nation together. The truth Australia confessed is simple but massive. Filipinos aren't just part of the Australian story, they are the story. Comment respect if you believe Australia's confession was only the beginning, because this is the moment the world finally sees what we've always known. Australia's confession was one thing, but what happens after the truth comes out? That's the part where the story shifts, when gratitude turns into dependency, and dependency turns into recognition. Because now, even Australia's officials are quietly debating something they once refused to say out loud. What happens if Filipinos stop coming? Let's paint the picture. Every day, thousands of Australians depend on a Filipino they'll probably never meet. A nurse who checks their grandmother's vitals. A civil engineer who made sure their highway didn't collapse during last week's floods. A teacher who showed up in a rural school when no one else would. That invisible network, that's the web keeping Australia stitched together. But lately, the strings are getting tighter. The Philippine Overseas Employment Administration, POEA, reported that nearly 12% of all deployed Filipino workers in 2025 are heading to Australia, a 22% jump compared to pre-pandemic numbers. Meanwhile, Australia's own Department of Health confirmed that 43% of new nursing registrations now come from overseas trained workers, primarily the Philippines and India. When you break it down, that's nearly 1 in 2 nurses keeping hospitals alive who weren't born in Australia. Now imagine a country running half its critical systems on people it doesn't always appreciate enough. The cracks start to show, not because Filipinos can't handle it, but because the pressure never stops. Many are still underpaid compared to locals. Others are stuck in visa limbo, renewing papers every few years with the constant fear of being sent home, and yet they stay, they serve, they rebuild. Because that's the Filipino DNA. Loyalty, even in chaos. It's why employers prefer them, why patients trust them, and why the country keeps calling them back. The confession Australia made wasn't just about labor, it was about character. It was about realizing that the heart of their success story was never just policy, it was people. And those people spoke Tagalog, Visayan, Ilocano. They sang karaoke on weekends and sent money home every payday. They carried 2 worlds in one heart. Here's the twist. That same loyalty is now forcing Australia to evolve. The government is pushing to reform its migration laws, to move from temporary skilled visa to the new skills in demand visa, offering better security, faster residency, and family sponsorship. Because they finally understood the math. Happy workers stay longer, and long-term Filipinos don't just build roads, they build roots. And that's what's really happening. Filipinos are no longer just passing through Australia, they're becoming part of its social fabric. In towns like Darwin and Adelaide, Filipino festivals now draw thousands of locals. Filipino restaurants are opening in rural regions that barely had one international cuisine 10 years ago. It's cultural migration turning into national identity. Take Marlon, a construction supervisor from Davao. He's been in Australia for 7 years, running projects for a company that builds affordable homes. At first, he said, I was just happy to earn, but now I train Aussies. Then he laughs, they call me boss. Behind that laugh is history rewriting itself, the migrant once seen as help, now shaping the system from within. Australia's confession isn't just about workforce gaps, it's about humility. For decades, Western economies believed they could run the world alone. But now they're realizing something every Filipino has always known. Progress has no passport. The global engine doesn't run on nationality, it runs on grit, kindness, and competence. And Filipinos bring all 3. And there's another dimension to this story, remittances. According to the World Bank, Filipinos abroad sent home over $39 billion, 0 cents in 2024, making the Philippines the 4th largest remittance recipient globally. And Australia's share of that pie, growing faster than any other OECD nation. That means when a Filipino nurse in Perth works a double shift, it's not just Australia that benefits, it's a ripple that strengthens families, schools, and communities thousands of miles away. But here's where the emotion hits hardest. For every record broken, there's a sacrifice behind it. A mother missing her child's first recital, a husband celebrating an anniversary through a screen, a son saving to build his parents a home he won't get to live in. It's a quiet kind of heroism, the kind that doesn't trend but transforms nations. So yes, Australia confessed, but the bigger story is what happens next. Because now, they're not just hiring Filipinos, they're learning from them, learning resilience, learning humility, learning that leadership isn't about status, it's about service. And in that lesson lies the future. The question is, will the Philippines do its part? Will it finally build a system that values its people as much as the world does? Because the truth is, the rest of the world already knows our worth. It's time our own government catches up. This is no longer a story about migration, it's about transformation, a shift in global power built not on weapons or politics, but on work ethic and heart. Australia admitted it first, others will follow. Because when the world finally takes a hard look at who's been keeping it running, they'll see the same face, brown-skinned, smiling, resilient, a Filipino. Comment vision if you believe this is the start of something greater the moment the world stops calling us workers and starts calling us leaders.